Can riots like the ones we're witnessing here in June of 2025 in Los Angeles be prevented? Can they be ended altogether? Can we actually have harmony? The answer is yes. I'm going to go through 5 steps that would have prevented the riots that we're having right now in Los Angeles. To do this, I have to start off with a premise. Number one, that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Congress is not the supreme arbiter of the law. Judges aren't. Governors and presidents are not. They all swear an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. That's number one. Number two, rights are for persons, and they're beyond counting, and powers are delegated to the government. So the Ninth Amendment is something we need to check in on here, because it says the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. In other words, rights are innumerable. We can't count them all. Just assume. The best presumption is to assume that human beings have lots of rights. But the purpose of the Constitution is to limit powers that we delegate. Those powers can only be delegated to the government. Here's the 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. In other words, if there's enough power is specifically spelled out, we can count them. They are enumerated. In other words, we can count them. And so there are a finite number of them. If the powers are not specifically spelled out in the document, the government doesn't have them. So the rights of human beings are virtually unlimited. The powers of the state are very few, limited, and we can see them because they're all spelled out in detail in the Constitution. If they're not in the Constitution, they don't exist. So if the government wasn't explicitly granted a given power, then it is assumed to belong to the people and these various territories we call states. You with me so far? So the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and powers are very, very limited. And we know them because they're spelled out. Which brings us to number 3, a very, very important point. According to the Bill of Rights, no person can be arrested without evidence of an actual crime. Now, having laid this foundation, we can say, well, wait a minute, aren't people who came across the border illegals? Aren't they therefore criminals? The answer is no. Unequivocal, no. There is no enumerated power in the Constitution that restricts the movement of peaceful persons, otherwise known as immigrants or aliens. The Constitution only deals with citizenship requirements. That's all it does. Naturalization is the word that our founding fathers used. It is how you become a citizen and how you participate in running for elected office or voting. Deportation of otherwise peaceful people is an initiation of force from a libertarian perspective, folks, and a violation of the Constitution. So all these people are saying, oh, the Constitution, we love the Constitution. The liberals, they don't like the Constitution, but we do. No, because right now, it is not a liberal administration that is using powers to arrest peaceful persons and take them from where they're at to somewhere they don't want to be. And I mentioned libertarian because for me, this goes a lot further. I would say that there's a principle of human respect at work here. We understand that everyone's pursuing increased happiness, harmony, and prosperity. They want to flourish in their life. And so when you use violence against them, when you grab them up and say, we're going to arrest you and take you from what you thought was your happiness and we're going to reassign you to a place where you are by definition going to be less happy, we diminish overall flourishing, not just for them, but for all of us. And we know this because there's a principle that says that every time we use violence or theft or coercion, we always, every single time diminish happiness, harmony, and prosperity. So we can't start off with a lose-win and arrive at the best situation. Win-win is the better one. Number 5, ICE, the immigration control, was created in this century, post 9/11. Same thing with the Department of Homeland Security. Both are dedicated to the premise that every human being, especially American taxpayers, should be monitored in all their dealings and transactions. And it's been true. They should never have been created. They were created out of fear, and they should be abolished. And anything less is below a constitutional standard. Anything less is below a libertarian standard. I, as a voluntarist, would go further and advocate for the full free association of human beings. Human beings are what matters. But if we're playing inside the rules of this system, then the minimum standard is the Constitution. And what's being done in Los Angeles right now, what was provoked by the very presence of those ICE agents, regardless of what happens next, we could say that the first blow was created through an initiation of violence that was unconstitutional in nature. And I cannot see how we can expand harmony. In fact, I'm not entirely surprised we have riots. Can't excuse them. They're wrong. That's wrong too. But so many people are focused on that aspect of it and trying to pick apart the nuance and ignoring the thing that happens at the very beginning, the start of it all, that we can use the state to drive home our social goals. And even if that destroys the lives of other human beings. And mark my words, the people being put in cuffs by ICE, they're human beings made in the image of God. I hope we can begin to recognize that. I'm Jim Babka with this installment of Instant Grace, part of Gracearchy with Jim Babka, sponsored by the Zero Aggression Project. Please like and subscribe to our, wherever you're seeing this, whatever platform you're on, and tell your friends about our program.